Hey, y'all. Welcome to an emergency taping of my NextAge Podcast. I really wanted to address the Kelis Beyoncé dust up, and I kind of wanted to make sure that we dealt with it in a really factual kind of way. There's a whole lot of conjecture and, shall I say, misinformation in the social media space. And I want to make sure that everybody knows like exactly how things work and exactly how um, the process goes so that nobody's in the dark about kind of like, who's there really is. I mean, everybody's feelings get involved and I get all of that, but there really is a right way and a wrong way to do things in this business. And so today I've had the awesome opportunity to call in a friend of mine who I think the world of. He's been not just a friend for me, but also one of my professors at the Berklee College of Music, where I've been doing my studies for the last couple of years. And is his name, just so everyone knows, is John Kellogg. And a little background on Mr. Kellogg. John P. Kellogg, JD, is director of the Master of Arts in Music Business program at Berklee Online and former assistant chair of the Music Business Management Department at the Berklee College of Music in Boston, Massachusetts. And he is an entertainment lawyer specializing in the music industry whose clients included Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees, the OJs, who are on their final tour. And Lord knows I want to see them here in Atlanta. The late, great Gerald Levert, LSG, which was Levert, Sweat, and Johnny Gill, rapper G-Dep of Bad Boy Records, and others. A songwriter and former vocalist with the group Cameo, he now advocates for the rights of artists through his teachings and writings, which include the third edition of his best-selling book, Take Care of Your Music Business, which, let me just put a bookmark. If you're in this business, you have to own this piece. It is just essential to your library if you're actually operating in the music business. I just want to leave that there. Dissecting and connecting legal and business strategies you need to make your music grow is the subheading. Kellogg is a Hall of Fame member of the Black Entertainment and Sports Lawyers Association, first African American to become president of the Music and Entertainment Industry Educators Association, and frequent commentator on entertainment industry issues on radio, TV, and other media outlets. Y'all, I am really a blessed man to today have with me Mr. John Kellogg. Brother John.
Hey, Kipper, thank you. Thank you for that great introduction and great plug for my book. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, listen, I mean, that was my textbook for Music Business 101 at Berklee Online, and I swear by it.
All right.
Powerful product is I preach it.
You make it, man. You've been making it all these years with all those great songs you've written, that's for sure.
Well, I appreciate you, man. I really do. So let's jump into this. I wanted to first talk about how somebody gets into this kind of sticky wicket to begin with, right? As kids or as young folks coming into the business, I know I had a band called Tees, which some people know, like back in the early 80s. We were signed to RCA Records in 1983. And we were signed through a production deal.
Right.
So we were signed to a producer, to Ollie Brown,
right.
And then Ollie in turn got us the deal at RCA.
Right.
So in that production deal, I mean, there were just all kinds of. If I saw that deal right now, I'd be like, take this, go somewhere.
Yeah.
Entry fee concept. I mean, it's like, okay, well, sure, let's go, let's do it. I mean, we're gonna do a record, let's go. So you're excited, you jump in, and then you turn around and go, wait a minute, I wrote that song. Not all six of us.
Right.
Those kinds of things that you don't find out till later. So I kind of wanted to talk about like that, that whole entry fee contract piece.
Right. Yeah. I think we can, and I think I'd like to start off first with this particular issue between Kelis and Beyoncé. Deals with copyright. Now, I say copyright is the most valuable asset in the music industry. Mm-hmm. Copyright is the most valuable asset in the music industry, and I say every time the music gets played, somebody gets paid. Every time the music gets played, somebody gets paid. And I say if you're an artist, songwriter, or producer, you should get paid, not played. And this music industry is rife with people who will play you. And it's important for you to understand your rights. And the key thing to doing that, particularly in the United States, is by understanding the United States copyright law, which gives the creators of original works the exclusive rights to those works for limited periods of time. Currently, that limited period of time is the life of the creator of the work plus 70 years. And sometimes, copyrights are property rights. And when you think of property, I like to come up with an analogy with real property or real estate. Real property is different from what copyrights are, which is called intellectual property. You really can't see intellectual property. It's out there. It's something that you can feel when people sing lyrics, and when they sing and emote in the studio and on the record, you can hear what they're talking about. Those are property rights kind of in the air. You really don't see it. Real property is like real estate, something that you can touch, but it's just as valuable. And it's remarkable how here in the United States, we have the right to create from our mind, to create property from our minds. And that's been one of the strongest ways for particularly Black talent to express themselves and to build up value in property. Well, there's two different types of copyrights that are prevalent in the music industry. And I'm going to try to very quickly just explain them, which will get to the question that you asked, Kipper. How does it work out with the rights as far as contracts go? There are two copyrights that are important in the music business. One is the copyright in the composition or the song. That's the basic lyrics, melody, and music. The basic lyrics, melody, and music. The copyright in the song is protected by filing what is called a performing arts registration, a PA registration with the U.S. Copyright Office. Usually, the copyright in the song is owned by the publisher. The publisher, that's to make the publisher there, and the songwriter. Now, the songwriter usually transfers an interest to the publisher, and that song is completely owned, usually between the publisher and the songwriter. That's the copyright in the composition of song. You also have a copyright in what is called the sound recording. The sound recording is the fixation of sounds that make up a recording of a song. The fixation of sounds that make up a recording of the song. And that copyright is usually owned by the artist who performs on that track and the record company. All right, now here's where we get into your question about contracts. In most conventional record deals, that record company requires that artist to assign or transfer 100% interest on it, 100% ownership interest that the artist might have in that recording to the record company, so that the record company usually owns 100% interest in that sound recording. There might be a different interest as far as, it depends on the kind of deal between the publisher and the songwriter, but that's what we have in this case. So excuse all my fingers I'm using here, but I'm trying to show a couple of different relationships here. So if we're talking about the copyright in the song, that was the song. Kelis was Milkshake, right? And that was with the Neptunes.
Yes.
Now, the songwriters were Pharrell and Hugo. They own an interest, and their publishing company own the interest in that composition. Nobody can use that composition without getting their permission. The recording is probably, I don't know who Kelis recorded for at that time. I'm going to say Interscope Records. But if it's Interscope Records, you have Kelis, who entered into a recording agreement with Interscope Records. And under the terms of most conventional record deals, that artist, Kelis, assigned 100% interest that she might have owned in that recording to Interscope Records. Now, she didn't do that for nothing. She got royalties, and she will continue to get royalties. But she doesn't own an interest in that sound recording. And neither does she own an interest in that song. That song is owned by Pharrell and Hugo. She doesn't own any interest in the song. She doesn't own any interest, copyright interest in that sound recording. She gets royalties from the sale of and streaming of the recordings, but that's it.
Interestingly enough, and thank you. I'm sure Nichelle Nichols is
smiling
now, live long and prosper.
Right. There you go.
So, but in terms of, I get it that she wouldn't have any interest in either way. I wanted to touch on that kind of a little bit too, because one of the wonderful things about being at Berklee and learning how this stuff actually works is finding out that in the United States, and I think it's United States, North Korea, is it Iran, and maybe China, that don't pay performer royalties for terrestrial radio. So, and when I say that to like anybody who's listening, when you hear Brandy's "I Want to Be Down" on radio here in the United States, I get paid,
right,
because I wrote the song. But Brandy doesn't,
right,
which to me is an atrocity. I mean,
and neither does her record company,
and neither does the record. How about that?
Correct.
That I don't mind. So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, because when we talk about that copyright in the sound recording, who owns that? Who has an interest in that recording? Atlantic Records, right? The record company. Brandy, even though she was a recording artist, she assigned her interest over to Atlantic Records. So they own 100% interest in that copyright in that sound recording. But they don't get any, when the record is played on the radio here in the United States, the record company does not get any royalty, and neither does Brandy. And in most other countries, like you said, they do.
Yeah, which I've long been an advocate of fixing, shall we say, of correcting that. I think that's a wrong. I really got alerted to it during the time that Mr. Levi Stubbs was still alive, who is like one of the greatest singers ever, probably one of the most heard voices ever in American music. And can you imagine Sugar Pie Honey Bunch? He was never paid for that. I'll be there. Never paid for that. I mean, and the list goes on and on. And so that can be that's a situation that is even bigger than this conversation.
It really is. And they have a law. They're trying to, in Congress, they're trying to pass a law to force radio stations to pay the owners of the copyright in that sound recording and the featured artist when their records are played on terrestrial radio. Unfortunately, the National Association of Broadcasters, that represents most of the radio stations and TV stations, have lobbied Congress so heavily that they've never passed that bill. And but we still continue to fight to try to make payments for terrestrial radio from terrestrial radio stations to the owners of the copyright in that sound recording, the record companies and the artists.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just had to kind of bookmark that there, because that's an also ongoing conversation in the industry and has been for years. I remember John Conyers, rest his soul, Congressman John Conyers, fought for that for years, and that was the first person I ever heard talk about it. And the late Mary Wilson from the Supremes also made her appearance very available for anybody who wanted to listen and talk about that. So that's a big deal. One of the other things I kind of wanted to talk about was the fact that we live in this age now of just, especially in the last 7 years or so, since the old boy took the trip down the golden escalator, this age of misinformation and the acceptance of it. And that comes like in the social media space, once the conversation gets going and all of that kind of thing. There was comment made about a courtesy call. No one contacted me to let me know that this was going to happen. And you've pretty much explained the way that the process works. I mean, there are people who own the copyright, who own the there's the writer and the publisher who own the PA, and then there's the record company and the artist on the other side, if the artist owns anything with the SR part. But there's a process that this has to go through. If somebody wants to, for instance, sample your record, or what we know to be called an interpolation, create an interpolation of your work. You kind of want to speak to that, the process and the difference between the two?
Sure, yeah. Well, in each of these copyrights we're talking about the copyright in the composition, we're talking about the copyright in the sound recording. It isn't just one right. It isn't a sound recording copyright, one right, or a composition copyright, one right. It's really a bundle of rights that are tied up with each of these various copyrights. So on the copyright in the composition, you have 6 primary rights in the bundle. And it includes one called the derivative right. That means that nobody can use a portion of that song without getting your permission to make. If somebody uses a portion of the song to make a new song, they can't do that without getting your permission. In other words, they can't derive a new recordings or make a new recording out of your a new song out of your song without getting your permission. And that is called the derivative right. In other words, you have the right to derive a new song out of a portion of your song. If somebody wanted to say the melody of I Want to Be Down from your song, they'd have to contact your publisher to get the derivative right. And they do that a number of different ways. They might offer to give you, Kipper, a portion of that new song. So then you're making money not only from I Want to Be Down, but this new song that was created from I Want to Be Down. That's called a derivative right. And you have to give a license. You and your publisher, Kipper, would have to give a license to whoever it was that was trying to create that new work and did create a new work from it. And that's the extent of it. And I'm sure that's what happened. Pharrell's publishers got a call and said, look, we want to use this in Beyonce's record. We're going to use a portion. We're going to interpolate either the music, the lyrics, or the melody, and we're going to use it in Beyonce's song. And of course they said yes, because there is some kind of payment there. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I haven't looked at the credits of the song we're talking about. Well, I think I did hear that they were credited on that song. So they were going to receive royalties from that song being interpolated in Beyonce's new new song. Mm-hmm. However, now since we've had this uproar, I think that Beyonce's removed that piece. Yeah. So I'm sure that Pharrell and Hugo are a little upset because as a result of this stink, they're going to be missing out on some royalties.
Yeah, I tend to always think that whatever Pharrell is connected to, he's producing. but he wasn't producing on this particular song. It was only he and Chad were credited as writers, along with 13 other people. Because again, that I don't even think that was the only sample on that song. I think every song on this record is just chock full of samples, which we'll talk about too, because I kind of want to.
Yeah. We need to talk about that one.
Yeah.
We need to talk about that. Yeah.
But they were credited, and of course now that she took that piece off just to kill the noise. But I have a question about that though. So I've never seen that happen before. I've never seen a record come out and then something change, and now it's different, and it's only been like 2 weeks. You know what I mean? So now there's two less writers. There's an interpolation that's been taken off. She's also changed a word that was in one song.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
And it's politically incorrect in terms of mental wellness or mental health. And so she took that out. I mean, I applaud her for that, for being sensitive to that. And then, there's the whole, now Monica Lewinsky wants her to go back and take out it's like, stop. Stop.
Right.
But with this though, while it's still currently in the marketplace and early in the run, so they took the piece off from Chad and Pharrell, but it's been out for 2 weeks with Chad and Pharrell.
Right.
So do they still have to?
I think they'll be compensated. They'll be compensated for whatever sales or streaming that occurred with that version of the song while it was out there. Now I think they've removed it from the streaming services, so they'll probably won't have any more streaming. So I think that they will receive royalties. It's not like they aren't going to get anything. But once again, this was the #1 album this last week and could be #1 for the next few weeks. So, I mean, it could be millions and billions of streams that they could have participated in that they aren't going to have the opportunity to participate in now as a result of Kelis raising this whole issue.
And like I said, I always tend to think that Pharrell is producing the record, and since he didn't produce the record, that he didn't get his big whopping 6-7 figure check, whatever that is usually.
Right. No, he's not a part of the sound recording. This is strictly Beyonce's sound recording at this point. They didn't participate in creating that sound recording, so they don't have any royalties coming from that source. That's for sure.
Nothing to even look forward to there. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm glad we talked about that, because it gets, the social media space is real interesting, and I've had the music business trends and strategies course at Berklee, where we talk about building fan base and engaging with your fan base and all those kinds of things, and it's you want this rabid fan base, you want people to just be thirsty for your next thing and all of that kind of stuff. And then you end up with a fan base like what they call the Beehive. These people are dangerous. I mean, it gets really obsessive, and so the language in the social media space and stuff gets very antagonistic and all those kinds of things. So, that was another reason why I wanted to kind of clear the air, because sometimes what people say, perception becomes reality.
Yes.
Someone will say, well, she stole my song, so she's a thief. I mean, and that's what she said.
Yeah. And that is not what happened. I mean, she did not steal a song. I'm sure that Beyonce got the rights from Chad and Hugo's publishing company to incorporate and interpolate their music, lyrics, or melodies into her new song. They did everything right here. It once again, it gets, it's understandable. I mean, it isn't rocket science, just what I explained, but it's just two concept in the ownership in the composition, ownership in the sound recording, but that's based on the laws that you need to understand. And, and you have to recognize that that's the society we live in. It's based on laws. And so you have to look at what the law is going to allow. And so, no, they did not have to get their permit. Now, maybe it would have been nice for them to reach out and say, hey, Kelis, guess what? Beyonce is using this song, but they didn't have to. There was no reason for them to do that. She wasn't wronged legally from that happen. I don't think she has any cause of action against anyone based on it. As a matter of fact, the whole issue that she raised, all it did was raise her profile, and you hadn't heard much from Kelis in a number of years. But now I understand that her streaming numbers started to increase drastically. People are streaming Milkshake, the original record, that goes back, and she might be able to get royalties from that, or she should get royalties from that as a recording artist for the use of that sound recording through interactive streaming.
That was another point I wanted to kind of make, because Beyonce gave her initially the credit, from what I understand, written by Chad Hugo and Pharrell Williams, as originally performed by Kelis.
That was on the credit.
That's from what I understand. They said she got a courtesy credit.
Okay.
I mean, which I thought was a leg up. That's a total. Right. I'll take that and call a couple of promoters and say, hey man, I'm on the new Beyonce record. Give me I'm going to play, the ballroom. I want to use it for the next part. You know what I mean? As opposed to kind of biting the hand that feeds you.
Yeah. That was it. I mean, like you said, Beyonce didn't have to do that because she didn't use any of the recording. All she had to give us credit was the songwriters, Hugo and Pharrell, and that was it. That's all she used, was a portion of the composition of the song, not of that sound recording. So she didn't have to mention Kelis's name at all. So, and like you say, I think the one good thing about this that I've seen over the past few years is that, and what's happening in social media and the discussion of these copyright interests, is that it's raising people's awareness, and hopefully will encourage them to educate themselves, particularly artists and songwriters, to understand what are their rights. That's one of the reasons why Taylor Swift's issues from 3 or 4 years ago, when her copyrights were sold, she signed the same kind of deal as Kelis did. She didn't own an interest in that sound recording, right? She signed a conventional deal with Big Machine Records. So you've got Taylor Swift over here signing a deal with Big Machine Records, where Taylor Swift assigned 100% interest in those copyrights in the sound recordings to Big Machine. She didn't own any interest in those copyrights in those 6 albums that she recorded from Big Machine, and she still does not to this day. And that kind of opened the door for people to say, what are masters?
Yes.
Those are sound recordings. But you have to understand that there's not only copyrights in sound recordings, but there's also sound recordings. There's also copyrights in songs, and those are owned by songwriters and publishers. Sound recordings are owned by record companies and artists, featured artists. Now, Taylor also happened to be a songwriter, but all songwriters aren't artists, and all artists aren't songwriters.
Amen.
So even though she owns her publishing in all those songs, she does not own those sound recordings. A new company, I think the new company is Hybe now, that owns her sound recordings from those first 6 albums on Big Machine.
That sold them off. Okay. Right. And speaking of the whole songwriter interest thing, and I just want to drop this in before we get too far off here, is one of the things that we are always conscious of is the contribution of each writer who created this piece. So Chad and Pharrell they wrote Milkshake, probably a 50-50 split. I'm sure it was no big shakes. Like it wasn't, well, I did the track and the lyrics, so I'm 80-20.
Right.
It was 50-50. And usually people try to keep it down. Like if it's 3 people, make it 33 1/3. I mean, just really keep it even and easy. However, sometimes it ain't so easy. But this thing right here, people, will save your life. Do not leave your songwriting situation, whether it be the room, the internet, however y'all are getting down. Don't leave without executing your, which way do I go? Split sheet, okay? that is just the ultimate in importance, because if that was executed when she and Chad and Pharrell created Milkshake, and say for instance they only put their names on there, but she knew that she contributed and she had a split sheet, well, here's my proof.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a good point, man. You know, when you own that composition, like I said, that composition is very valuable. Who owns that song? Mm-hmm. Well, you need to have a document showing who owns what interest in that song. Once again, copyright's the most valuable asset in the music industry. We talked about Taylor Swift and Big Machine selling her 6 masters to, at that time, Ithaca Holdings for $300 million. All just based on those copyrights in those sound recordings. Mm-hmm. So same thing's true with your song. It happened with Blurred Lines. How you had Pharrell and you had Robin Thicke. T.I. was involved, but he just added a rap. So, but he's a songwriter because he contributed lyrics to that. Mm-hmm. But Marvin Gaye, his estate came in and said, "Wait a minute, we deserve an interest in that song because you derived a new recording or a new song, Blurred Lines, based off of Got to Give It Up." And they filed an infringement suit, and the estate of Marvin Gaye won a 50% interest in Blurred Lines, which is important. But my point is, like you say, and you're absolutely right, Kipper, sign a split sheet so that you have something to show. And you're right. Had Kelis done that, maybe she added a couple of words, right? Mm-hmm. But at that time, she should have said, wait a minute, I made a valuable contribution to this song. Give me 10%, give me 25%. Let's sit down and enter into a split sheet on that. If that was the case, that might not have been the case at all. Mm-hmm. But that's why you're right. You have to identify what you own and have some documentation proving what your ownership interest is. And another point I want to comment on, and you open the door to this, and it's the difference between the ownership of copyrights and songs. It's the difference between the old music business and the new music business. Mm. And I, for years, encouraged people not to sample because I know how valuable that copyright is. And the more you give away, the less you're going to receive from your creations. So I encourage people, unless you have to, the only way you can make music is to sample others. Try to make it your original work yourself. Own as much interest in those copyrights as you can, because they're so valuable. However, and there was a big, like you said, the Beehive jumped on Dianne Warren because she sent out a tweet saying, look, there's 20, how do you have 24 songwriters on one song? And she got some good response, I thought, though. I mean, people were saying that, look, Dianne, these people that are creating new songs today might not have been trained musicians, might not have had the opportunity to do that. They're creating art by using other people's works, and they're putting different pieces together. And that's a valid point. However, I think that these songwriters need to recognize that when those royalty checks are split in 24 different ways, there's not going to be much left for them. And hopefully it'll drive home the point that the more you can add original content to your work and the more that you own of that copyright, the greater amount you're going to be able to benefit from the money that's generated from it.
True enough. Yeah, that Dianne Warren piece, I'm glad you brought that up. It's kind of like, and this is kind of the way I felt about it. And I understood her intent maybe, but it was, as the kids say, it was a lot of shade. We are, and when I say we, I'm talking about, Black folks and Black musicians,
right,
and especially young Black people. We are creative in ways that almost can't be explained. I mean, we will create whatever the next thing is. Hip hop is now the driving force in the music business. I don't care whether it's country, pop, wherever you are. There's hip hop is everywhere,
Right.
and it started with 2 turntables and a microphone because we are the arbiters and we say how it goes and how it works, and everybody else has to catch on. So hip hop is now turned into this sample fest. Yeah,
Right.
it is.
That's a good way to put it. The sample fest. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is, and it's a new way to be creative, and all of those kinds of things. So it was a little shady for her to say, "Oh, how do you even have 20 writers on one song?" First of all, you write ballads. Nobody's sampling your stuff to do records. I get it, and maybe you're not familiar with that. I can't imagine somebody that has 4 pages of Wikipedia songs does not know how that works. But
Does not know how what works.
well, that you could have 24 writers on a song.
Oh yeah, right.
You know what I mean? So to me, it's kind of okay. I'll give you a pass, maybe, but no. I thought it was just being a little shady. Like maybe they're doing like some sort of ghetto business over there. Like, what are they doing?
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of felt some kind of way about that.
Right.
Kind of thing. However, again, it's where music is right now, and it's how these kids are creating all over the world. Some of these kids are writing songs with people they've never met, and they ended up on a 10 million selling album, and that's kind of how things work.
Correct. And you've got to appreciate the art for what it is.
It's
and that art would not exist without them being able to compile all of these elements of works to derive a new work.
Yeah.
It's all derivative work.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It is new and it is creative. Once again, I just get back down into you have to recognize what it is that you're doing and what the ramifications of that is.
And handle the business accordingly. I mean,
correct.
If there are, and so that brings me to my, this is probably my last question. So I did notice that on Beyonce's record, on the Energy record, which is the song in question, that Milkshake was interpolated for, there are 15 writers on that song, on that particular song. And I guess that's before Chad and Pharrell came off. But looking down the list of the songs on that album, there are 12, 15, 20 writers on a song. And yeah, it's because of the sampling thing and the way that, that it's all put together and all that kind of thing. Have we, and because there's so much business that has to happen. I mean, you got to make sure that all these samples and interpolations are cleared before you can release a project, because then somebody can come back to you on the back end. But the business that has to happen behind all of that. And like I said, they're pulling stuff off. We got this record out and they're taking things off and moving stuff around. Have we hit a wall of sorts? I mean, when it comes to this whole sampling issue, does something need to change to facilitate that? I mean, business-wise, is there I think there's a niche business out here. So I know there are clearinghouses, but
yes, right.
But I mean, in terms of like how hip hop works and how these R&B and records, soul records, or not even soul records, but R&B records are being made now. I think we're kind of headed down a dark street. This is Beyonce and she's having all these problems.
Right.
Can you imagine what your neighborhood local artist is dealing with?
Right. No, that's a good point. And that's why they need to have good representation to make sure that they're steered to proper sample clearance houses to make sure that they have the rights they need to release the product that they're releasing. I think what it does, Kipper, it's going to create new innovative businesses. And a lot of my students have been talking about coming up with businesses that help artists and provide the services of getting clearances, of making sure that either the recording artists or the songwriters have their business taken care of, looking at it, evaluating it, going to get the clearances. So I think it you can look at it one of two ways. I don't think it's that we're hitting a wall. I think it's that we're really breaking through to a new era, and that new era is just what this whole dispute that was caused by Dianne Warren saying that, and what's actually happening, to recognize that this is the way the business is now. As I said, I argued against it years ago, but now I understand it and I respect it. Mm-hmm. People are creating new art by compiling different copyright interests. Mm-hmm. And so you just, and with all of the innovation as far as the technology goes, it shouldn't be hard for people to come up with programs that can analyze who owns what. And I'm saying that without really knowing what's going on at the record company level now, because, and I'm sure that they have departments that are specifically dealing with that. Give me all of the information that you have. We have to clear it, because now you have all of these digital service providers that you have to provide the information to. And there are really just millions and millions of uses that these copyrights are being made of. I mean, uses in every kind of area. Mm-hmm. And you want to make sure that the proper people get paid. So it's going to create new opportunities for people in the music business to get involved in that, to try to track it so that everybody that's supposed to get paid does get paid.
Well, I hope that we answered a bunch of questions here. I mean, I know that there's so much information. Anybody that's watching this, man, I suggest that wherever you see this guy, this John Kellogg guy right here, wherever you see him, if he's teaching a class, if he's speaking somewhere, if he's going to the gas station, follow him. He is an amazing wealth of information and knowledge, and this is what you want to know to be in this business, because you don't want to end up chasing stuff and being not knowledgeable about what it is that you're doing. And I'm just so blessed to know this guy and have him at my avail. I think I'm in a really good position to have this conversation, because, like, for instance, I got a cover on this it was a sample of The Last Chance the Rapper album. I love that kid. I just, because I was doing the Berklee program, and Jay and them are turning me on to, all this independent stuff, and I just love it. I love the indie method. I'm a DIY guy till I die. I'm done with these record companies until, you gave them a lot of credit saying, I'm sure they have, departments that are doing that. I'm not so sure.
Well, you may be right.
You
might be right. Although they're concerned because they'll get sued too.
Absolutely.
So the record companies isn't doing this for any other reason except to protect themselves.
Absolutely.
But so they want to get all the clearances done too.
Your students who are coming up with new business models, bravo. That's what I want to hear. I want to make sure that the business is going to be safe. And I'm sure with you out there in the atmosphere, man, still instilling all of this great information to everybody, that this business is in good hands. And I appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad to see that you're having programs like this to try to get the word out there. It's very important. Like I say, Black talent is to blacks what oil is to Arabs. It's one of our greatest natural resources, and we have the ability to create property from the creative ideas of our mind. That's one of our most valuable resources. So we need to understand how to protect and how to benefit from it. Because, like I say, every time the music gets played, somebody gets paid, and you need to get paid, not paid.
Yes, sir.
Kipper.
Thank you, John. That's why I got my little Richard shirt on today.
All right, then.
Oh, very much, man. God bless you. Thank you so much for joining us on NextAge today. Appreciate you.
All right. Peace.
Yes, sir.